Well, good day. Good day and welcome to Mental Health and You. I'm your host, Cynthia Timms. Welcome. And I must admit, I am a little bit tired today. I've been tired a lot lately. I've been full of anxiety lately. Who can relate? But I'm still here. I'm still here and I'm still on the move. I'm learning slowly but surely how to be more kind to myself, though. I'm learning slowly but surely how to relax more. I guess you can say I'm taking lessons from the ancestors. Lessons from the ancestors. Whether it's my mother, my grandmother, my aunts, my cousins, and other women throughout history who I have admired. Who can relate? Who can feel something that I'm talking about personally? How has life been for you lately? As the news comes almost every day about layoffs, people being laid off from their jobs, people getting sick, all these diseases going on, it leads me to wonder, what lessons can we take? And oftentimes I think about in times like these, we have to look back in order to look forward. I'll say that again. In times like these, we have to look back in order to look forward. So what does that mean? It goes back to lessons from the ancestors. I remember when I was a little child growing up in the Bronx here, my mother used to take me on the bus to Harlem to church. She was a deaconess in the choir of AME Zion Church, Walters Memorial AME Zion Church in Harlem, on the corner of 121st and Lenox. And this was a church also where basically all my relatives up here belonged to. Growing up in the Methodist church, it was my grandmother as well, and my aunts and my cousins. And they all were members of the deaconess board. I remember how proud they look and how good they look on the first Sundays when we had communion. How they would be in their white, their white dresses, how they would walk the aisles, how they would sit in the front pews, listening to the pastor. And as a child growing up in that atmosphere, at the time I quite didn't understand. I quite didn't understand because I was a child. But I also realized looking back now that there was lessons being taught. All of these people that I just mentioned, my grandmothers, my aunts, my mother, they're all gone. They're all ancestors. They're all in heaven. But when I look back, they taught me lessons. They taught me lessons in community. They taught me lessons in joy. Joy even in the midst of pain. They taught me lessons in resiliency. The world could be a cruel place, but as a child, I just remember being in the church. I remember being in that atmosphere of community, of love. I remember the songs that were being sung. I remember the preaching that was being preached, the sermons. I remember the music. I remember joining the choir. Under duress, my mother had me join the choir. I think I was about 10 years old. And I remember crying and screaming, not wanting to be part of this, not wanting to, I dare say, make that commitment, but my mother was not knowing that my mother was making that commitment for me. And looking back all those many years now, it was a lesson in there. It was she was saying, Cynthia, you're going to be part of this community. She was teaching me something that I didn't know then. She was teaching me what it meant to be loved and to be appreciated and to be hugged. Because that was what was needed then, and that's what's needed now. So I joined the choir. My mother had me join the choir, and I learned to love it. I mean, it was a slow love, but it was a love just the same. And what did I love about it? This little light of mine, I'm going to let it shine. I love the prayers. I love the preaching. We used to sit, the choir, the junior choir, we used to sit in the pulpit right next to the senior choir. We used to sit in the pulpit right behind the pastor. My pastor growing up in the AME Zion Church, Walter's Memorial, I remember it well, like it was yesterday. Dr. Reverend Paul Thurston. And he had this robe where he used to, this long robe he used to wear. And he used to preach about a wheel in a wheel. He used to preach about making it. He used to preach about how we as a people were great, how we need to be proud, how the church was such a force in our community. And as I'm listening to it, I'm about 10, 11. I'm still not quite getting it, but I'm getting it in a way, if you understand that. These are lessons from my ancestors. And as the time went on, as the weeks and the years went on, I became a Sunday school teacher. Then I became superintendent of Sunday schools. And that served me well in some of the darkest days of my life. Because by the time that happened, by the time I took my lessons as a Sunday school teacher, I was beginning to fully realize, I'm about maybe 17, 18 years old. I'm beginning to fully realize then the power that was within those walls. I remember my aunt, oh my goodness, my Aunt Johnny Mae, my mother's oldest sister, how she would get so happy and start clapping. There was a certain song that would come on that she would get so happy that she would start shouting up and down the aisles. And it used to scare me. But now I know, looking back at it, that joy. Yes, they may have caught hell during the week, but when they came within those walls, when they came within that space, in that place, in that community, they were sister this and sister that. They were brother this and brother that. They were the elders. They were the ushers. They were the deaconess board. They were the choir members. We were a community. And I say that to say that that community, even in the midst, has always been important to us. Even in the midst of heartache, in the midst of heartbreak, has always been important to us. We have communities all over, and it could be the church, it could be the school, it could be in someone's home. We have communities all in our midst. I started this show today saying that I was tired. I started this show today saying that I was anxious. And that's real, for I am. But guess what? In the midst of all of that, I also have joy. I have the joy that was taught to me by my ancestors. I have a joy that transcends all the pain of this world. You know, sometimes I got to remind myself of that. So I ask you the question, what type of joy do you have? What type of, yes, joy. Not just being happy, but a joy that, where is it that you find your joy in the midst of being anxious? Where is it that you find your joy in the midst of being depressed? Where is it that you find your joy when you so need it? Where can you get it? You know, maybe your joy comes in a good night's rest, sleeping. Sleep is highly underestimated, y'all. And that's okay. That doesn't mean that we're lazy. It just means that you're human, that we're human. I got to learn that myself. As a peer specialist, I try to share that with my clients. I try to share that with the patients that I serve on a daily basis. What is it that brings you joy? What is it that brings you happiness? A sense of, yes, my life is worth living in spite of everything. What gets you up in the morning besides a job? And that's important. You know, the lessons I learned from my ancestors. I talked about the church and its importance in my life. And as I get older, I'm learning to appreciate it more. Where have you found your joy? Where can you find it? Have you lost it? I empathize with that. Sometimes I feel I've lost mine. But then I got to remember those things that even in the midst, that raindrop, that sunlight, where can you find it? What have the ancestors taught you? Let's talk about some of those ancestors, those other ancestors I've spoken about on this show, Mental Health and You, that I've learned lessons from. Let's talk about, for example, Miss Fannie Lou Hamer, one of 20 kids on a farm, on a sharecropping farm in Mississippi, who was, my goodness, didn't go past the 4th grade, but she knew that there was something better for her. She knew about the power of the vote. She learned about it one day when she went to a meeting of SNCC, the Student Nonviolent Committee. Fannie Lou Hamer, who was given a involuntary hysterectomy by a doctor in Mississippi to keep her from having children. You see, y'all, that was a way that certain people in this world use our bodies in order to prevent us from having babies. It was a way of involuntary birth control. But in spite of all of that, yes, she was depressed, and who can blame her? She was anxious. She still had a song in her heart. And she used her voice as a form of activism. She used her voice and her singing as a way of activism in order to make life better for her and her family in her community in Mississippi. Miss Fannie Lou Hamer, y'all. You need to read about her. We got Women's History Month coming up. We need to read about her. She's one of the heroes of our world. The lessons we're learning from our ancestors, that in spite of the pain, in spite of, this woman was beaten. This woman was put in jail and beaten to a point of almost near death. But she didn't let it stop her. I know she was tired. I know she was weary. She died prematurely, I believe, not even 60 years old, of cancer in the early 70s. Her body was broken, but her mind and her spirit was intact. Lessons from my ancestors. Let's talk about another favorite of mine. Let's talk about Miss Daisy Bates. You know, Daisy Bates, she was the architect, one of the architects, y'all, of the Little Rock Nine. She was a journalist in Little Rock, Arkansas, who, along with her husband, ran one of the black newspapers in that city. She was one of the architects, as I said. She was one of the mentors, probably the main mentor of the Little Rock Nine. 9 brave souls, teenagers at the time, who helped to desegregate Central High School in Little Rock, Arkansas. She did this against all types of threats against her life. Her printing press was bombed. Her house was bombed. But she kept moving forward. What can we learn from our ancestors? What can we learn from her about resiliency and just moving on? Don't you think these couple women who I've mentioned thus far, Fannie Lou and Daisy Bates, don't you think they had hard nights, sleepless nights? Don't you think they had anxious nights? But they kept moving. They kept praying. So when I think about this, when I think about these, you know, and your pain is your pain. I'm not, I'm not trying to underestimate it. Your pain is your pain, and it is real. What I want y'all to know that there's hope. That's what we talk about in peer support. There is hope. There is hope, and there's still reasons to keep going. Let's talk about another one of my heroes, Ms. Ida B. Wells. Ida B. Wells, yours, was a journalist and a teacher. She was born in Mississippi and grew up in Memphis. She grew up to. She was one of the probably the first anti-lynching journalists who openly wrote about the psychology of lynching. How it was more than physical, but it was economical. And she was run out of town in Memphis after 2 of her friends were lynched, 2 black businessmen. She was run out of Memphis and fled to Chicago, where she continued her activism. She became a founding member of the NAACP. She's one of my heroes. But think about that. She was run out of her home. She was raising her family after her parents died. She grew up to be a teacher and a journalist. She was also thrown off a train when she had first-class tickets. Oh, yes. And this sparked there were few sparks that activated her activism. Don't you think she was tired? Don't you think she was weary? But she kept moving on. Miss Ida B. Wells, y'all. Study her. Learn about her more. Fannie Lou Hamer, Daisy Bates, Ida B. Wells. We're talking about lessons from the ancestors. Who in history has inspired you? What lessons can you learn? Maybe you had a favorite relative. Maybe it was someone from your neighborhood, a school teacher. I cannot even begin to think how school teachers have helped me so much, have inspired me so much. Was it that woman on the corner? Was it that educator? Was it somebody in church? You know, who was it that inspires you or inspired you? You know, we're living in uncertain times, but you know that already. We're living in hard times, but you know that already. We're living in times that sometimes we just don't know. Oh, but you know that already. How am I going to pay my rent? How am I going to put food on the table? How am I going to get to work? Now, do I pay my rent or do I put food on the table? How am I going to just pay my bills? Man, I remember my grandmother. I remember my grandmothers, both of them, on my father's side and my mother's side. I remember my aunties on my mother's side and my father's side. I remember my mother, who's been gone for over 40 years, but sometimes, it feels like it was just yesterday. I still think about the lessons. Even if the lesson is taking care of yourself. We're not super women, y'all. We're not supermen. Some people may think we are, but yet we're not. We're flesh and blood. We have pains, we have heartaches, we have heartbreaks. But guess what? We're still here. It's been a joy and a pleasure being here on Mental Health and You, sharing with you for almost 6 years now. Trying to take the stigma out of taking care of yourself. But I think it's also very important. I think it's very necessary. In my work as a peer specialist, I talk about that. At least I try to convey that to those who I serve. I'm not where I want to be there, but I'm not where I used to be either. So as we wrap up, I want to ask you, what lessons from the ancestors can we learn? Can we think about? Can we recall? That resiliency, that smile, those family dinners, that music that we used to play, even in spite of everything. Oh, I love Marvin Gaye, and I love Nina Simone, and I love Ella Fitzgerald. And I love, oh my goodness, all because I grew up in a household where these were played. Music feeds the soul like poetry it is. Dance feeds the soul like poetry. A walk on the beach, a sail, a kind word, a good meal. These things maybe that we take for granted, but they're within our reach still. So what I've asked you again, what lessons from the ancestors can we take back? What lessons from the ancestors can we remember? Maybe you like to write. For me, writing opens up my soul. Maybe you like to paint, like to draw. Maybe you like to take a walk. Maybe there's that good movie that you've been trying to get to see. That TV show that makes you laugh. That catching up with that friend over a cup of coffee. What about those raindrops, that sunlight, that cool breeze? What lessons from the ancestors? They're looking at us. They got us. I know times can get tough. It can be dark. But in the darkest moments, there's that bit of light that comes in. What lessons from the ancestors, y'all? What lessons from the ancestors? As I leave you, beloved, think about that. I'm going to do that. And again, I want to thank Bronxnet and its staff for giving me this platform. And I want to thank you for being part of this wonderful experience, this ever-evolving experience of mental health in you. So thank you. Thank you so much. And by all means, stay woke. For Mental Health in You, I'm your host. Thank you, Cynthia Timms. Good night. Be well and be good to yourself. Thank you.
What's up, creative family? Discover your voice with Bronxnet Community Media classes. Are you ready to bring your ideas to life? At Bronxnet, we offer television production classes for community members ages 18 and over, empowering you to share your vision with the world. Get certified in field production, in-studio production, and our new exciting addition, podcast production. Once certified, you can create your own show to air on one of our 6 TV channels. It all starts with our free Unleash Your Ideas Masterclass, designed to help you plan your show idea and set you up for success on your production journey. This class is offered at the beginning of each month for your convenience. Our dedicated Bronxnet team is here to support, encourage, and uplift you every step of the way. Join us and become a part of the creative force that engages and inspires the Bronx community and beyond. Sign up today and start your media journey with Bronxnet. Visit bronxnet.org/education to learn more and register. Let's create something amazing together.